Welcome to Engaged Company Culture, a podcast directed at you, helping you to stop the employee exodus in your organization. This podcast has 3 different types of episodes. First, you have tips, tricks, observations, stories, research from me, Dr. Catherine Weiberg of Profitable Alignment. Second, interviews with other consultants, other coaches who are here to serve you so you can learn other tips and tricks to engaging your employees, to stop the employee exodus, to consciously create and continue a company culture where people want to be and where they encourage other people to come to work and to become your customers. Third, I interview other business leaders who have engaged company cultures and want to share their stories. You might learn from them how they have applied principles of company culture to increase their employee retention, increase their profits, increase their productivity, and increase everyone's job satisfaction. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Engaged Company Culture. Today's guest is Ash Shastry. He is the owner of Elite Communication and Performance. Ash is a leadership and sales consultant, speaker, and trainer. Ash helps ambitious people become high performers and modern leaders through high impact communication skills. Ash, I'm so happy to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me.
The first thing I would like to ask you is your leadership style development story. Since you work with high impact leaders, let's hear how you got there.
Yeah, this is actually quite interesting. So as many people who probably come into this space, I was a management consultant before that. So I worked at one of the big 4 management consulting companies, and it just turned out that more and more of the projects that I was working at ended up being coaching leaders of some sort or managing teams and kind of growing their efficiency, just so we can get into the process improvement side of things. And about 5 years later, COVID struck, and we were sitting in pandemic, just basically working online, and I realized I had a lot more time in my hands. So at that point, I was in a project where we were rolling out a whole new agile team to disrupt the departments of this global company that we're working at. And that was my role to kind of lead on that project. So at that point, I discovered, this could be done in this way. And what if we change the leadership teachings to this? And basically figured out a bunch of pieces of the puzzle that could meet in different points to not just impact this one team, but work with all of their partner teams and make the whole thing better. Turned out that once we did that, that became the highest performing team in that company ever, which was pretty cool. And so the CMO that we were reporting to at the time spoke to me and said, hey, why don't we roll this out to other teams as well? And I thought, so this is interesting. I could do something with this. During that time when we were working in that company as well, I had a lot more time on my hands, and as you do, you're on social media and you see so many more people at that time were talking about starting your own business, do this, do that. And I and my business partner at the time, we both, was a friend on the same project, we both had an idea that we wanted to pursue, but we didn't really know exactly how to go with it. And so we started off in something completely tangential, but eventually went on to just do communication skills and confidence. So that's where we started. Me and my business partner at the time, and we just started coaching individuals on the things that we were really, really good at, which was presenting confidently and speaking to people, because that's what we were doing day in and day out, right? Over time, that transformed itself where we were speaking individuals to then started to speak in events and training multiple people that way. From there, there's a guy in one of the audiences that I was speaking at who was one of my ex clients who had started working in a different company and he said, "Hey, this is cool. Why don't you come and help my company do this?" And at this point, we had quit our jobs and just started just doing the one-to-one trainings and speaking at events. And so I decided, yeah, of course I'm going to do that and train your teams. And so I developed my management style through that way, because I led a couple of teams myself, and then I taught that exact same thing along with the communication side to this company. From there, I just thought, this is amazing. I can just be working with companies to teach them how to do these things that I'm really good at, and I figured out that a lot of companies need. So that's where I've come to that. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's fantastic, quite frankly. I love that you so quickly started with what you recognized that you did well, at recognizing that an expert is somebody who could be a few steps ahead of where somebody is, or could be a mile ahead of where somebody is. But your goal is to help people get to where you are, and then you get somewhere new and get them where you are. I love that you went from an agile system to growing. So you could still, of course, do Six Sigma, you could do agile approaches, but as you were learning and developing, you were helping others learn and develop. For me, that is key to an engaged company culture, is to recognize we all have someplace we can start, and now we can move forward with it. What can we do better? Oh my goodness, this team is now the best performing team ever in this organization. And this former client is now at a new organization and says, "Oh, Ash, we want Ash." And there you go, getting pulled in and just finding new ways to use your strengths and to encourage others to use theirs.
Yeah, it was really cool. I had no idea, obviously, that any of that was going to happen when I was first doing it. And like I said, it's great that I started with my strengths, but I think it was a bit of a luck, because I didn't know what else to go with, and I had an inkling of wanting to start a business. So I thought, oh, might as well do something I'm good at.
Exactly. Well, and it's good to recognize that luck does play a part in it. You can be phenomenal, and you can do all the things. Sometimes it's luck of finding the right person, walking into the right event, saying the right thing, and then somebody sees, oh my goodness, you're amazing.
Yeah, I think, also what it was is that when I started training the one-to-ones, and then even when I went to the company, I could have easily just said, okay, cool, I'll help you, set up this agile team, which is what I did several times. But I then recognized that actually there's a lot of companies that basically play in that space, and they're massive. They've been in the space for a long, long time. But just because you have the methodology that you go and put into place doesn't mean the users of it are going to do well, and doesn't mean that the rest of the players around it are going to be engaged in the thing that has just been launched. And one of the things that I was very happy when I did it was when I was training the people to get into whatever empowered them to produce their best work. And so that high performing culture, which is what I called it at the time, is what I thought, oh, that's what I'm really good at, because I lived that kind of lifestyle, and I hated working extra long hours, all this kind of stuff. So I was like, look, guys, we need to try and get as much done as possible during the time when we work, because I don't want any of us to feel like we are giving up all of our life to work, especially when we're in the pandemic and we have nothing else to do. It becomes a default. So I thought, we need to create a culture here that other people can look up to once we go back. So why don't we start doing that now? And that ended up being a thing that I fall back on now all the time.
I love it. You said a couple of things in there that just got the wheels in my brain turning. So I'm going to, first of all, you talked about you like to help people understand what empowers themselves. So I'd love to know, how do you help leaders recognize that in themselves or their teams? What advice would you give?
Yeah, this is a great question. So one of the things I quickly realized when I was speaking to some of these company leaders was that most of the time people get into that position because they were really good at their previous job, right? So they get recognized in some way, and then they get a promotion and they're there. once they're in a senior management position or leadership of some sort, their job changes from being whatever they were doing to then just managing, inspiring, and motivating people. So it's a big shift, for people who are like, wait, I was good at this thing, and now you want me to do that thing for 20% of my time, and 80% of it is spent on something that I've never done before. So if we can spend time with them to work out what their strengths are, kind of like what I did when I was starting my own business, but then how can you understand A, your personality style, B, your strengths, but C, your way of communicating with others, and then you align those three things, you get a very, very in-tuned person who can then connect with everybody else because they understand themselves so well. And of course, when we go through the training, you also understand other people and what they require to be spoken with the way they want to be spoken with. So when you go through that and you understand your strengths, you're like, great, this is stuff I'm good at. Let me extract as much of this as possible. And once you are in this happy place, you can then help your team come up to that happy place themselves because you are no longer confused about how to lead, right? You're like, I know what I'm good at. I know what I need from my team. I know how to speak to people. Let me get the best out of you because I'm not stressed about everything I need to cover in my time.
That is fantastic. I admit you're singing my song. We're basically from the same choir on that, because I have a very similar approach. Help people understand what they do well. Recognize that what they do well is a superpower, and then they can find other people's superpowers. I also love that you pointed out that people get promoted from doing a task well or a job function so well, and then they're expected to manage other people or lead other people, and they don't always know how to do that. In my consulting career, I've met people who said, I loved what I was doing. I didn't want to promote to management, but they said, you do this so well, promote to management. And it can be an interesting thing because not everybody wants to lead. And if their leaders recognize that maybe they were happier and they were more engaged doing the things instead of helping other people do the things, that they can empower their culture. They can strengthen what they're looking at, so that either following the approach that you have mentioned, they can learn to know themselves well enough to know how they can approach people, or they can learn to know themselves well enough to say, but I don't want to. And then go back to the people who appointed them and say, but I don't want to, and see what you can negotiate from there. Maybe there will be two people in that position and it will become a split position. Maybe the person who does the task so well can teach other people to do the task, but not be responsible for the leadership of motivation. So many opportunities come out of them knowing themselves the way that you encourage and the way that I encourage, and recognizing what can I bring to the company and how can I help others reach that next level? Is it from being a peer or from being a leader in title or a manager? How can I add to it? I just love that you brought that out.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think that's a really good point because we often don't really think about, the individual choices and needs or preferences that they might have. So that's actually a really good point as well. When we talk about leadership side of things, like sometimes it rarely happens, but in my experience, I've only had it a couple of times where somebody has actually said like, oh, I'm in a position, I really don't want to be here. Like, what do I do? And, this comes to that like personal leadership versus professional leadership, right? Like, how do you want to operate as a person and where you feel you fit best? And ultimately, somebody once told me this and it's kind of stuck in the back of my mind. It's like, you control your career. Like, if we're going to be working for 40, 50 years, let's not let other people dictate where we go. Let's just draw our own path. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'll take that. And I'll spread that advice wherever I can.
Exactly. It's recognizing your own power to run your own life. And just like you were talking about empowering cultures, empowering leaders, it's that self-empowerment, recognizing I can be somewhere else. That's one of the reasons that the Great Resignation has happened, is that people realized during COVID that they had more choice than they were giving themselves credit for. And they can take control and not live in panic or scarcity, but like you, they can say, you know, I'm spending so much time working, let me do something I love and help other people to love what they want and starting a business. Maybe it's just finding the passion of what drew you to this position and this organization in the first place. When you find that passion and reignite it, what does that do to your culture? And really looking at that. So with everything that we've touched on, and I realize we've gone a couple different places, what advice would you give to the rising generation?
So one of the, I'll give two, if that's okay. One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever received, and I think this was, I try to see where I can attribute this one, but I always forget. I think it's someone on one of my first days when I was first starting to work, you know, when you have those like speakers who come and motivate you, it's one of them basically said, only take advice from people who have done what you want to do or have what you want to have.
Exactly.
And that has stuck with me and has, you know, allowed me to make really good choices in my life and avoid making bad choices, which is probably more important. And then the second one I'd like to give is, in the last few years, we've seen a lot of people talk about starting your own business or glorifying entrepreneurship and things like that. And, you know, Great Resignation, I think, found that one of the reasons that people were leaving was because they thought they had so many options to make it on their own that they don't want to work for somebody else. But I've come to realize that you don't necessarily have to do that. Like, entrepreneurship is actually really, really hard. Like, you know, I'm 2.5, nearly 3 years into this, and it's like, it is a lot of hard work, you know, a lot harder than what people think and a lot harder than being in a job that somebody gives you money regardless of whether you're good at it or not. And if your end goal as a rising generation is to be very wealthy, but also live a life full of choices and ability to do whatever you want, then you could easily achieve that by being an employee. You know, it could be at a startup, it could be at a scale up, it could even be in a big company. You can achieve all of those things if you play your cards right and you have, you know, other investments and lifestyle choices that you've made. If you have a burning desire to create something of your own that you then want to control and you then want to sell or whatever, then maybe pursue that entrepreneurship thing. If not, it is, I think people make it feel like it's a shameful thing to want to stay in a job, but I think it's actually okay. Like, just do it. You know, whatever your goals are, go with that and don't care about what other people say or think.
Thank you. I completely agree. Entrepreneurship is so frequently glorified and made to look easy, but those of us who have jumped into it, it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. It has to have the passion behind it. And entrepreneurs are looking for people who want to work for them and who bring great things to them. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to be successful. I love that you emphasize that. You can develop the life that you want by being an outstanding employee. You can be an intrapreneur, where you bring an entrepreneurial perspective to build a company where you give 40 hours a week, 20 hours a week, and you go home and you can leave work at work. Entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily allow that. And for many, for
Never.
99.99%, it doesn't allow that.
Yeah. 100%.
You can't achieve those same lifestyle goals, often in a shorter period of time, depending on the approach. You don't, it's not a one size fits all. You don't have to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to be an employee. You have to be happy in what you're doing and good at what you're doing, so that somebody will pay you for it.
I think that's so true as well. That whole being good at what you're doing. I think that's probably like, if I could add a third one, that's probably what it would be. Like, gain enough skills and put enough effort into becoming good at that. And if I could recommend one skill that somebody gets good at, is communication. Just like being able to articulate your thoughts and your values successfully and succinctly to other people, because that's probably the thing that differentiates somebody who can be a high performer and somebody who's just a really good employee. Like that ability to talk to others differentiates everything.
I don't think you could have said it any better than that. Thank you so much. So what advice would you give to somebody who wants to be heard? You're talking about communication. Let's springboard off of that.
Yeah, I'm glad we were segueing that way. So this is really cool, right? So I think when I was doing the one-to-one confidence and communication skills, that sort of stuff, a lot of the people that I was working with tended to be the ones who said, I can't speak up in meetings, and I want to be able to present, but I get really nervous. And oftentimes the common denominator was something like, oh, I want to say something, but by the time I formulated what I want to say and how it's going to come out, the conversation's already moved on. And I was like, okay, so what happens when you want to do that in your friend group, right? And they're like, oh, same thing. Okay, great. So this is not just a work thing, right? It's like a confidence thing. So if you want to be heard, you have to be worthy of being heard, if you know what I mean. So because everybody has egos, everybody wants to speak. And if you're in a group full of introverts who are also shy, chances are nobody wants to speak. So no one's really want to be heard, right? But if you're in a group where there's even 1 to 2 very outspoken people, like domineering people, not necessarily in a bad way, then you will not get heard unless you put yourself out there. So like I have a problem when people often say, oh, but I'm an introvert, I can't speak. It's like introvert and extrovert has nothing to do with your confidence level. Like you can be an extremely confident introvert who can speak out, but so I think if you develop enough confidence and the ability to speak your mind in an assertive way, you will be heard. And you don't have to be loud, you don't have to be boisterous, you just have to know when to voice your opinion and go for it. So I think it just comes with that training to think to yourself about like, okay, what do I want to do? And then actually do it. That gives you the confidence that you can do whatever you say you're going to do. Because the more you say you want to do something and don't do it, the more you retract from your own confidence and the more you make your body believe that it can't do things, because it constantly keeps saying it's going to do something and never fulfill it. So that means the converse must be true as well, at least in my opinion and my experience. It's like, if you say you're going to do something and then do it, well, great. That's like, you're being coherent with your thoughts. So the more you can do that, the more confidence you can generate for yourself. And then obviously you have to try and start with a smaller approach where you're in a comfortable setting with your friend group, maybe with 2 or 3 people, and you start saying small things and you can accelerate up from there. And it really doesn't take that long. When we're doing with our clients with the one-to-one side of things, literally within 2 to 3 weeks, people are starting to speak in meetings. We get emails by them saying, oh my God, I can't believe it. It's the first time I spoke and people asked me to do this, do that. Like now they want me to present. How do I do that? Like these are better problems to have. If you had to present because you were so good, that's a much better problem to have.
I love it. I love it. All of these things were going through my mind, and then you tagged a couple of them as you were talking. I appreciate it. I loved it. I don't often talk about Toastmasters on my podcast, but it is one option for people to learn to speak out. It's one of my personal favorites. Also, like you were saying, you don't have to go to something as formal as Toastmasters. You can start with your friend group. You could even get your friends together and say, I want to practice this. So let's look at these kinds of questions and let's practice this together. You could do it at the dinner table with a significant other or an entire family. You could even start at the mirror and just practice. Think about things that are important to you that you wish you had said in a previous meeting. And how would you say it if you could be back in that same situation? I love that you're talking about people are discovering that within 2 or 3 weeks of working with you on how they can communicate, which is what you mentioned at the very beginning is something that you do well, that within 2 or 3 weeks they're saying, oh, I have a new problem. It's not that I'm not being heard. It's that I'm being heard and they want to hear more. I love that you said it's an upgrade in problems. It's
100%,
so much
100%. Yeah, if you're gonna have problems, might as well have bigger ones, right?
exactly. That are showcasing you, that are showing how amazing you are, that are showing other people on your team, that are showing yourself that you are worthy of being heard. Just another phrase that you used earlier, that you're worthy of being heard. Sometimes you just need to know it yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And one of my favorite tasks that I give to people, and this is probably the easiest one to do, is decide where you want to go out to eat when you're with friends. So oftentimes these same people, is a common denominator, right? Like same people who have these speaking out problems will be the ones who will not make a decision or even suggest where they want to eat when there's a group discussion happening. So I often say like, okay, cool, next time this happens, or if you don't have anything planned, plan it with your friends, and then you be the person to suggest something and decide on it. Say, hey, I want to go here, why don't we go here? Chances are people will accept, even if you're not the usual dominant decision maker, whatever. The moment you come out with a decision like that, people will usually follow. And when that happens, it just makes you feel so good that you voiced something, it was heard, it was then followed. You're more likely to want to voice something else in the future. So that's a thing that if anybody listening has an issue with, go try it out.
I love it. You said, even if you're not the dominant decision maker, I want to say often because you're not the dominant decision maker, you're going to catch somebody's attention. That's going to give you the opportunity to, one, catch their attention in the first place, and two, have other opportunities to contribute because, oh, Ash had this thought, and when he suggested we go this place for food, that was brilliant. I wonder what other things he's keeping under wraps. What else can we draw out of Ash? What else can we learn? How else can we involve Ash? And then suddenly Ash is on an even playing field with everybody else. Oh, you know what? Ash has been so quiet, but let's listen.
Yeah, 100%. And then the confidence you develop in your friend group or personal life easily translates into your work life because it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? It's the same scenario, just the discussion and the topic is different. So you have one opinion, voice it with confidence, and then people want to hear more.
Exactly. Oh, thank you. Thank you. We're talking about all of this success. We're talking about how we can move forward and how we can be successful. How about failing well?
If anybody hasn't read this book, I would 100% recommend. It's called Go for No.
I love it.
Teeny tiny book. It's
one
so
of my
good.
Favorites. One of my favorites. Okay.
Yeah, I love it. It's a teeny tiny book. I think it's like 100 pages or something like that. So you can literally read it in one sitting. But it redefines the idea of failure, and I loved it. Basically, to explain it really simply, I think it's we are in the middle. Normally, this is our current frame. It's like we're in the middle. There's success on one side, failure on the other side. But this book reframes it to say we are here. Success is on this side. Failure is a path to get there. And that shift literally just changed everything when I was starting my business in the beginning, because I was like, I need to be trying to make the right decisions all the time. And I went from that to thinking, I need to make a decision, that's all. And then learn from it and iterate. And when you're in the workplace, if you're leaders, if you're trying to generate a culture, it's kind of the same thing. Like some people take 6 to 9 months to figure out a strategy to implement, and by the time they implement it, it's the next year, and the strategies you've developed are out of date. So instead, if you can make a decision that is, with, I think Warren Buffett was saying, it's like good decision making is making a decision when you have 70 to 80% of the information that you need, and then pivoting from there when you get the 20, 30% of the information that you needed. So if you can follow that, then you're making better decisions faster, and more people can follow you along the changes, especially if you can communicate why you're doing what you're doing well. Then the leadership can really look strong. and the employees can back that because they understand what's happening, their voices are being heard, and you can just follow from there. So there's no real failure. There's just learning from the decisions that you make.
I love it. Go for No is seriously one of my favorite business fable books. It's brilliant. So when you said that, that's why I could not contain my excitement and just listen for the moment, because it really is considering failure as the path to success, not as the roadblock for success. I've heard so many acronyms for fail. One that I love is first attempt in learning, but I have changed that. That's from Liz Ryan. I have changed that to further attempt in learning, because that's what it is. It's the opportunity to move forward. It even comes back to communicating, to stepping out and being heard in the first place. You're going to fumble the first several times. What can you learn from it? How can you do it better? I love that you brought up Warren Buffett having 70 to 80%. I admit I have not heard that quote, but that is a shift that I'm going to hold on to, because it is so easy to get caught up in the, I want to make the right decision, I want to do everything right, and getting into that analysis paralysis. But being able to pivot as you gain information and say, hey, at least we're moving forward. Then you can have your further attempt in learning. You can follow the path of failure to success. I recommend, just like you did, either read or listen to Go for No, because it creates a whole different mindset and a whole different mind shift. It empowers you to really move forward.
Yeah, 100%. I have to say, like, I don't know if it was Warren Buffett or Richard Branson. It could be somebody else entirely, but somebody said that quote and I liked it.
Well, I find it brilliant, and I might just find exactly what it was so that we can attribute it properly in the show notes. But it's brilliant, and I'm so grateful that you shared that with us. From this conversation, what do you most want people to remember and act on?
I think, the idea that it's possible for people to do the things that they want to do is probably something that's like near and dear to my heart. Whether it's as an individual or as you're an employee in a company, or you're a leader in a company, like whatever it is, the thoughts that you have are better shared than keeping it in your own mind. And that's always been a philosophy that I've tried to live by. Communication is key is a very cliche saying, but it cannot be more true when you're in a leadership position, because you are there to improve your company, improve your own standing, improve your team standing. And no opinions that you have can truly be that bad, because if there's an ounce of good in there, somebody else will probably take on it, you can riff on it, and you'll build something much, much greater than anything else. So whenever you've got a thought, if you're an employee or in leadership position, voice it, and voice it to the right people.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think I'm going to put some of that on my inspiration wall. I love that so much.
Absolutely. Just have all these quotes, walls of quotes to like draw from.
Oh, if you could see my wall, that's exactly what I have. I have little spots of inspiration to remind myself if I'm having a moment of down. So and I have some Go for No things up there. It's just that reminder when you start to get caught in yourself. Well, what can you do to move it forward? How can you be empowered? How can you fail well? How can you speak what's on your heart? Because there's value to it. So everybody gets to do it differently. That's mine. This my wall.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Now, you did give me a Linktree link that I'm going to put into the show notes, but what is the very best way if somebody wants to reach you? What's the best way from that Linktree to reach Ash Shastry?
Instagram is probably where you can reach me the fastest. I am on most social media platforms as Boss with Ash. It's just that. So whatever social media platform you use, if you search that, you will find me, and you can DM me. That's the easiest way to get in touch.
Boss with Ash. I want to know where that phrase came from. I want to know how you developed that before we sign off.
So a lot of thinking. I am terrible when it comes to naming things, by the way. Like this, I don't know why. It's a big blocker for me. I hate naming things. So it was actually my sister who came up with it when we were thinking about it. So previous to when I was working with just one-to-ones, like the idea was to boss up their life, right? Because it would go through communication and confidence, and from there they would feel like a boss. And before all of that, I used to really like the brand Hugo Boss. So I think it just stuck from there, boss up life, blah, blah. Now I'm working with bosses. So they're like, look, you just keep caring about this bossing thing. Why don't you just get people to boss with you? And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And she's like, yeah, boss with Ash. That's going to be your thing. And I was like, okay, I can't think of anything better. So we'll just keep boss with Ash for everything.
I am a total fan. I love that you listened to your sister, that she spoke up, and that she found your theme and said, well, hello, this is exactly what you do. So here we go. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, she did. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's good. I mean, yeah, like I said, if one day she comes up with something better, I might take it. But until then, I'm sticking with it.
Well, you get to move forward with Boss with Ash. Everybody who has been listening or watching, I hope you have enjoyed this interview, even a portion as much as I have, because if you enjoyed this even slightly close to as much as I did, you will have received value. Ash, thank you so much for being here.
Catherine, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed speaking with you and sharing all this laughter. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to or viewing today's Engaged Company Culture episode. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. I hope you have learned something and have something that you can apply today to engage your company culture and encourage your employees to enjoy work, looking forward to Mondays instead of only looking forward to Fridays. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone else you know. Also, like and subscribe to Engaged Company Culture anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you and have a wonderful day.